intro, right? I can still do the intro?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, okay. All right.
Let's just. I don't know if it's started yet.
It's live. It's live.
Okay.
Yeah, I see
Alrighty.
it.
Cool.
Okay. All right. I guess we're skipping. We're not even counting the weeks now. It's just another episode of All the Factors.
Yep.
All right.
Just welcome to all the factors.
Just all right. We're doing the welcome to All the Factors. All right. Cool. 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 All right. Welcome everybody to All the Factors. We are. I'm a little nervous today. We have a guest, but I'm nervous. Hello, hello, Reckon. As we said last week, we're diving into a little bit of a complicated topic, at least for me, and we're gonna talk about it and try to understand like what DEI is. And we have a guest who's really gonna, um, you know, leave us here with supreme knowledge on this topic. We're gonna be experts. We're gonna be able to talk about this to anybody. So,
Okay.
welcome to All the Factors, and we're gonna get this show on the road. Um, Go ahead. What do we have for intro? What are we doing for intro here?
Alrighty. So, basically, a reason why we're bringing this up is because DEI has played a pretty major role in what Trump has been prioritizing in his with his agenda so far. I would say, I mean, we're in his first 100-day agenda, and he's already made several um, DEI policies. So I'd say it's pretty clear that it's something that he prioritizes.
Yeah.
Um, from the start, he has just like from the start of his presidency, one of the first things he did was cut DEI for federal programs. He cut any federal workers who worked with DEI, especially anybody who had DEI in their title.
Yep.
And I mean, we all saw that in terms of federal grants, anything that had DEI or any words that they deemed to be DEI related, like even so much as the word female, like um, couldn't be stated in a grant proposal because then it's an automatic denial because it's DEI. Um, Outside of his policies, he's disparaged DEI up and down. He blamed the plane crash that happened right after in DC after he was inaugurated. He said, common sense, it's probably due to DEI. And then, I mean, he's talked about it this whole time, and then even as recently as his joint address to Congress on Tuesday, he called it I don't remember what exactly he called it, but he did his DEI is done, woke is dead, his nonsense. So
The
that's basically where we're at in terms of the
yeah,
administration and why DEI is important right now.
yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean like if anybody even watched that for even like 5 seconds, it was his campaign speech. Like that's another. He's still running a
Literally,
campaign.
it
He's
really
running a
was.
campaign, and that was one of his more buzzwords that he constantly used all the time, run up to the election, just to feed his base. And yeah, he's done a lot of crazy stuff. Pretty much everything that was wrong, um, quote unquote, wrong with the country, it's either blamed on Biden or DEI. It's just
Right.
easy, I guess. It's just easy to blame that.
I mean, definitely, it's an easy scapegoat, I would say. But
Yeah.
with all that being said, I did want to introduce my wonderful friend Stephanie, who agreed to be on with us today. I did just want to give her a little bit of just a little background on Steph. So, Steph, I'm going to read it for you, but then after, I would love it if you could jump in and just add anything that I missed, and maybe talk a little bit about like how your experience, like your work experience, has related to DEI more specifically.
Hmm.
So sorry for my reading voice, but I have to read it because I don't have it memorized. Okay, Steph is a communications professional currently serving as a senior manager of communications and marketing for a local Massachusetts workforce board. Steph has 8 years of nonprofit work experience as well as 2 years of experience as an AmeriCorps service member. In her 8 years of experience, Steph has held direct service roles in which she has worked with youth towards pursuing their employment goals, as well as grant management roles in which she has overseen her organization's use of both state and federal funds. Stephanie, I would love it if you could take it away and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. I guess I want to say, first of all, I'm not a DEI expert by any means. I'm learning a lot more about DEI as all these executive orders are, coming up and kind of taking a toll on our organization at this time. But yeah, I've been with this nonprofit since 2019 in different roles.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing like direct service, working with youth, helping them like find and apply for jobs, and then I was managing a federal grant, which had was a lot of obstacles in itself, but it's a big amount of our funding with that federal grant that we have. And then now I'm doing communications and marketing, and I think with everything coming up, DEI is uh, playing a big role because we have programs and initiatives at the nonprofit that are solely like DEI focused. Like DEI is built into the name of the program.
Right.
And yeah, I mean there's a lot that I can go into about like how that's affecting the nonprofit, but um yeah, we just like our mission is DEI. So um yeah, there's just like a lot
But
that's
can you
coming.
talk a little bit more about that? Like, what does that mean? Like, the mission is DEI. Like, what? How is that different from, like, you know how's that different? I guess.
Different than what?
Like uh, that's the part that I don't understand. Like I was kind of saying, right? Like, well, you have civil rights protections, right? Like where you can't discriminate against workforce or anybody based on gender, um, sexual orientation or whatever the case may be. Like, what does DEI provide extra more than that, right? Like, how do they like how do, that's what I'm like. How do they start? Like, why did they come up? Why is it like this thing? Like what? Why was it needed?
Well, I'll say in itself, DEI is providing like equal access to opportunities for everyone, right?
Mhm.
And we should be providing equal access to opportunities for everybody, but we're a society that does not do that. We have
Right.
all of us have our own biases, right?
Yeah.
So it's acknowledging that we have those biases and then creating opportunities for everybody based on those biases. Does that kind of
No. So yeah. No, that's perfect. So what those programs that you're talking about are designed to help companies or like just like
So
so?
yeah, I can
How
talk a
does
little
that
bit
work?
about more specific programs that we have. Like we have programs that kind of we've had one that help immigrant entrepreneurs learn more about starting their own business.
Okay.
So those are people that you could say, we all start off at different levels, if you will, and some of us have more privileges than other people, right? So
Yeah.
somebody that might be a newcomer to this country might don't have the same opportunities as me as like a white person born here have, right?
Yeah.
So we're creating these programs to help get those people to the same level and give them more opportunities so that they can thrive.
Right. So like, does somebody approach you, or well, since you're a nonprofit, like, like how does that work? Like, like an immigrant or any minority, they approach you, or like, how does that work?
So we apply for state and federal funding. And so we apply for it, and then if we're granted it, then well, we have like a whole proposal, right, for a program before we even apply for the program. We
Hmm.
have, or apply for the grant. And then if we get that funding, then we can put that program into play, right? So we kind of look at the high priority needs in our community to create a program based on that. So the community that in my community, we have a lot of immigrants, right? So we created this program for immigrants. We have a lot of ESOL individuals. So we've created programs to create classes to teach people English.
Ah,
So it's really
okay.
like identifying the needs in the community to create a program for that. And then we go after the different grants that we can find. And if we're granted that, then we use a lot of the funds to grant different programs in the community. So some of the programs that we run are in-house, but we also fund a lot of other nonprofits within our community.
It just kind of hit me, like, right. as you mentioned it, I'm a recipient of that. I just realized it, like just very moment when I came to this country in seventh grade. I could read English, but I didn't speak it. I didn't, do anything in regards to that. So I remember, like, besides going to like the regular seventh grade classes, um, instead of going to like English, they would put me in like a separate like corner, and then they do teach me English. Like it was just a one-on-one kind of type thing. When you were talking, it just kind of like hit me. Maybe like, in Connecticut, that school applied for some program that, as you mentioned, and they got funding from you guys to run that program. That was probably a thing that happened. I had no clue. I literally just realized it. You know. Um,
Yeah,
so
and
it's
I think
kind of
that's
like
a
it
good,
kind of works like that.
yeah, I think that's a good example of like what DEI is. It's like providing those programs, and you don't even know that you're a recipient of it, right?
Right.
But now, like, you had that source, and you're able to thrive with the program that was
Right.
provided.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
So, I mean, I feel like if we buttoned DEI up, what it is, especially if we're looking at it against like the Civil Rights Act. So the Civil Rights Act just says you can't discriminate people based off of these items, gender, race, disability, etc. Well, disability was added after, but
Right.
that's
Right. But it's
besides the
there.
point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but still, as it is today, no, you can't discriminate. But DEI takes it a little further because it's adding
Yeah.
opportunities for people who do have some sort of, I guess, quote unquote, limitation in some way, just to make it more equitable in their chances to like participate in that program or participate in school or be an effective employee, whatever it is, or participate in the workforce. So I mean, it is one of those things. I mean, not before we were like recording, when we were just talking, you're like, why are people against this? I feel like when you look at it like that, it's like, how could you be? Because yeah, I mean, you benefited from it. There's no difference between that and me also getting extra help because I have like dyslexia light, like in school. Like, so I had like extra reading.
Wait. What is
extra. I don't know. I wasn't diagnosed, but I cannot like. It took me a long time to learn how to read. Just like putting that out there.
Whether you got the light version of it, whether the ink ran out or something.
My point is just like DEI initiatives cover people with learning disabilities, language barriers, all this sort of stuff. So, so I guess I don't know, Steph, would you agree with kind of that definition that they're just like programs to kind of pump up, I guess, the Civil Rights Act, like make it even more effective, I guess.
yeah, programs, policies, procedures. Yeah, I would agree with that.
No, that's cool. Like I like every day, like when this thing comes up, I was just always confused. I was like, well, like I understand, like there's no discrimination, like you know, it- it's just a helping hand. Like that's what it is. Like you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, but I don't know. And before DEI, it was yeah. Even there was no discrimination or anything like that. I feel like people would like nepotism's still there, which is completely
Hmm.
legal to do. Like you can get fired at any time you want. That's completely fine. I just never understood it, but I swear to God, like the light bulb just like it just went up. Like,
Whoops.
now I understand. Uh, but that's cool. So, what has I guess we kind of already talked about like what Trump's done to change it and how he's blaming it. But how I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back to fucking blaming the Democrats because it's their fucking fault. They're just. I'm not gonna use the R word. I'm controlling myself.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah, you
allowed
could.
they've allowed Trump to. We get political in here, so this is gonna be just more than a conversation about DEI. We're they've allowed Trump to turn this DEI into a trigger word, right? Like that's what it is now. Like nobody understands like what it is. It's just like as soon as you now, even like me and you and all of us now, like when we hear DEI, like if you're just, let's say you're at the gym and then there's somebody working out next to you, two people, and then they're like talking about DEI. You're like, the next thought is gonna be, are they talking shit about DEI or like what's going on? You know what I mean? Like it's that negative connotation associated with it now, and I don't think it's gonna go away anytime soon. Um, and I think the part of this like conversation with us is what the Democrats need to be kind of doing. Like, you know, if somebody would have, like, somebody like to me, again, who consumes this kind of stuff regularly, now imagine somebody that doesn't, right? Like, if all they ever hear is, oh, the just negative thing associated with DI, they're gonna start to believe, oh yeah, like, you know, like the like I know that happened at my job. Like they hired this person over somebody else that probably because of, you know, their color, their gender or whatever, you know, instead of it's
Right.
just
Well, people
no, you know,
people automatically think affirmative action when they think DEI, which
exactly.
affirmative action is just one portion of DEI, and affirmative action really came, I guess you could argue it kind of came first, because DEI seems to me, I mean, Steph, you can add, but it seems like it's more of like a relatively new concept, or at least it's relatively newly labeled. I mean, obviously affirmative action is a kind of DEI, but it's also like, if you're so firmly against affirmative action, like affirmative action has been basically depleted throughout history, and we're
Well,
kind
it
of
doesn't exist anymore, right? No.
Point now, yes, where it doesn't really exist. Basically, it got to a point where, like, it started off with like everybody thinks of quotas, right? Like this many of your workforce or school has to be a woman or a person of color.
Right.
That was struck down in literally the 70s. Like you haven't been able to do that in ages. And then, I mean, we just saw last year the Supreme Court struck down allowing race to play a factor in university admissions. So there's really not anything anymore that somebody can say is explicitly, you know, an affirmative action program. Nobody's getting preferential treatment because of their race. These are just, again, programs that enhance equity.
Well, one group is getting preferential treatment.
Exactly. And people get upset about that. But I mean, I want to show that video that I sent about the boys' school.
Yeah.
Just so we can kind of talk about that as like a surprising, I guess what people wouldn't normally consider DEI.
Yeah.
You know, considering based off of just kind of that line of thinking that you brought up, that it is like, you know, people automatically assume we're discriminating against white men. So let me do that. It always takes me forever.
Again, just to clarify, that is illegal. You cannot discriminate against white people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not that it happens anyways, but you know.
All right, sorry. Take me. All right, this is the one. You guys can see it?
No.
Mm-hmm. Whoa.
You should have just let me do it. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. Should have just let me do it. But it's okay. Hey, you know what? You wanted to do it.
All right. All right.
It's the dyslexia light kicking in.
I've got it. I can't believe I said that. I don't know, like, what's wrong with
Hey, we gotta open the diagnostic manual right now.
I'm like embarrassed that I said that. My point was just that, like,
we have moments. We have moments. We have moments. You get it. It's all right.
Struggle was identified, and I got extra help for it, which is not required, but because of DI type programs or, you know, civil rights type programs, they were accessible. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. All right, are we ready? You can see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Changes have been positive. All of you.
I've been getting better grades. I've also been happier in class.
The reason? A wave of changes designed to solve a growing gender gap in education. with boys at least half a grade level behind their female peers in reading in nearly every U.S. state, and nearly 1 million fewer young men heading off to college compared to their female counterparts. Which is why, starting last year, this private all-boys school decided to do something about it, with 3 big changes: a ban on cell phones, a first period for activities, and more time for hands-on projects.
It does take away a lot of negative emotions like anger, anxiety.
If you don't have your phone, you're saying?
If you don't have your phone, yeah.
It really just helps us all feel like we're connected and together.
Headmaster Chris Post calls it a win-win.
It costs virtually nothing.
The changes are part of a growing nationwide movement to make education more boy-friendly.
Our boys aren't doing well enough. There are twice as many girls at the top of the top 10% as there are boys. Boys are much more likely to be suspended, much less likely to finish school on time. So the overall story is pretty clear that our education system is not serving our boys well enough.
What would you say to critics who say, look, girls could benefit from these changes too?
We want to find ways that lift everybody up, but which particularly offer a helping hand to those who are falling furthest behind. And in schools, that's very clearly boys.
Thoughts?
Okay, so Steph, I wanted you to kind of speak on that for a second, if you would. And so I found this fascinating, and I also thought it was a pretty clear example of DEI. But in the comment sections, there was huge fights about whether it was or wasn't DEI. I know you don't want us to say you're an expert, but someone who has gone through quite a bit of DEI training, would you say that you believe that this is an example of DEI?
I mean, I would say that it's an example of DEI. It's a little different than I guess we're used to seeing, mainly because it's portraying a lot of boys, right? And there were a lot of white boys there too. But like we said, DEI benefits all people, right? So it's going to also benefit those white men, those white boys too. So this is an example of them giving these kids an equal opportunity to, get that, I guess, concentrated attention that they need in order to be successful. So yeah, it's showing like different people getting that same opportunity.
Which everybody can benefit from, like that person mentioned at the end.
Right.
Absolutely. I just think it's interesting that like this need is so accepted. Like nobody's gonna look at that and be like, oh yeah, no, that's not real. Boys aren't really falling behind. Or if they do like admit like, oh yeah, they're falling behind, but they should just
This is
try
what we
harder.
should be doing
They're just not trying hard enough. Like they're looking at it, like most reasonable people will say like, and I'm not gonna say no one because I know there's a lot of unreasonable people out there, but people will typically look at a situation like that and be like, yeah, that's something that should be done about it. But DEI is the same kind of across the board, I guess.
No, like it's so easily accepted, in that scenario. It's so easy, like it's not even accepted, it's expected. Like you expect the school system to do that. I don't know. It's just I have brain functions malfunctions constantly on this stream from what we even talk about, like all the time. I don't understand this. Like I don't understand like why it's like okay for one group to have this, be totally accepted to have this thing there, and then like, but if it's people of color or if it's women, it's not. Like, you know what I mean? I don't understand it. Maybe that's why I don't understand like what DEI is. Like, I just don't understand like what this whole thing's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like,
it's such a controversy.
Yeah, like that's the part I don't get. Like, if somebody needs help, they need help. It's just simple as that.
Right. I mean, I think being against these initiatives is kind of like, it just would hold us back from like in society, period. Like,
right.
Like we all need to progress if we want to progress, right? Like,
imagine me, right? Like in 7th grade, just to go back to my story kind of type thing. If I'm not giving those extra, English classes to learn English, to be able to speak English, right? Then I just struggle throughout my whole 7th grade, because they did it for 2 years or something, 8th grade. They did it for 7th grade. They did it for 8th grade. You know, I would have struggled then. Then I wouldn't have gone into high school, you know, to be fully prepared. Now I do poor in high school. Now if I do poor in high school, then I'm doing poor in college, or I don't even go to college. Right? That just drastically holds me back as a productive member of society.
And these are all, I mean, I would imagine for the most part, they're all evidence-based, right? I mean,
yeah.
So that was proven that that was happening to people. That's why we have these programs put in place, I would imagine.
Right.
Steph, if you're okay with it, I'd like to play the TikTok that you made a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Here's what
listen, you gave me courage to make a TikTok, so you know it was great.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm glad I encourage people. I always cringe at watching my own TikToks, so I try not to. But I always get like really like so much rage after coming out of like work meetings where we have to talk about DEI and how we have to like downplay like our programs and everything. But I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like make a video of myself talking. And if anybody watches this, then
you know, actually, before you play the TikTok, that's another thing we haven't really kind of hit on. So, and I kind of had that thought earlier too. Is if DEI is working the way it's supposed to work, that means you are able to apply for these programs, you know, and then create these programs, and then like, you know, disseminate these programs to wherever they need to go. What has changed since Trump? We didn't really talk about that. How has it made your job harder, or how has it changed your job?
Yeah, so I will say right now, nothing besides our external communications has changed. So we still have the same funding that we had before, but there was a lot of worry that we weren't going to have our federal funding anymore. And then they kept on going back and forth with that. And it's still kind of uncertain, right? Like, can't really depend on having that federal funding. We as an organization specifically are okay if we don't have that federal funding, because we have a lot of state funding. And it's also kind of interesting because my supervisor told me recently, like, we're going after a lot of state funding, and the state funding that we're going after puts an emphasis on DEI, and they want that's like embedded into the proposal. Like, how are you going to embed like DEI initiatives into this program and tell us about that while we're applying for this grant? Meanwhile, we have our federal grant that wants us to not use specific words on our website, on our social media when we're talking about our programs. So what triggered me to kind of make this TikTok is a discussion that we had internally about not using the word equity in our external communications. So I had to go through all of our social media to kind of flag where we use the word equity, if it was like a hashtag, if it was in a caption, if it was in like a graphic on our Instagram, because we could be dinged for an audit if they see that we wrote equity on our social media. So at this time, I had to take time in my position to go through all of our posts for the last fiscal year to see if we mention equity in anything and then write it down. I don't have to change any of that wording yet, but if we go through an audit and they're like, okay, we see that you use the word, specifically the word equity here, I'm gonna have to go back to that post and take it down. So I think where it's changed when it comes to like communications is how we rephrase talking about equity, but not using the word equity. And it also comes into play actually when we're like talking about like our contracts too, and how we talk about equity with our contracts. But yeah, I was in a training recently when we were talking about these executive orders related to DEI, and it's a huge concern for nonprofits across the country. Like, how do we talk about these initiatives that we're running, but using language that doesn't trigger the administration, doesn't get our 501c or 3C status taken away? And that's a big fear. And I think it's a lot of like legal language that's being thrown around, used as like a scare tactic to make nonprofits, I don't know, like kind of like scared to talk about these initiatives and change their programs so that we're not centering these different populations that really need the assistance.
That feels so icky that like
Yeah.
the use of one word can just like completely take down a whole organization. Like
Yeah.
remove your 501c3 status because you used a word.
But I
Yeah.
also think it's interesting too, because the training I was in, it's not all nonprofits can't say the word equity. It's really up to like that nonprofit specifically how you want to talk about equity in your programs that are ensuring like DEI, that you kind of feel comfortable with using that language, which it's really like confusing to me, right? And it's probably confusing to you because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so as somebody who's in communications, like what is the wording I can use on our external communications to talk about this? We internally were like, okay, we're not going to mention the word equity, but it's not like across the country you can't use the word equity. It's really up to your organization how you want to talk about it, what you think might be dinged if you go through an audit. So when I made that TikTok, that was specific to our organization and what we said we're gonna like kind of monitor using this specific word. But it's also hard because we have a specific program where equity is built into the name of the program. So it's like, okay, do we have to take everything down that mentions that program's name? So we're having a lot of internal discussions about how we can talk about these different programs, but equity was definitely like the trigger word for our organization.
And it's just kind of funny too, right? Is like, well, when you were mentioning it, like when you're dealing with a federal program, you gotta really like be tiptoeing around this. But then when you're talking to like a state, program, they want more equity. It's like you got to go from one extreme to another, and like you don't know where you can use it and what you can do. Because what if like the state is looking at you like, well, you're not doing anything about DEI here, you know what I mean? And then what if they take your money away? It's kind of like you're stuck in a rock and a hard place. It's just stupid.
Right, and that's exactly it, because we're going after the state funding, and they want to see like how are we, like what is our DEI, how is that embedded into our programs, but then we can't talk about it on like our website the way that we would want to show those funders, because we have the federal grants over here being
Daddy
like,
Doge.
oh, we don't want to see that.
Daddy Musk.
So it's like as somebody doing communications and like putting stuff on our website and everything, I'm like, okay, so what do I need to put? I need to know exactly like what are our safe words, right? Which is like such a sad thing to have to think about. And to use staff time to like go through our posts to count how many posts we like mention certain words, because we don't want to make like our administration like Daddy Trump sad. Like I don't know.
Papa, please forgive me.
It brings out a lot of rage in me, and it instills a lot of fear.
I didn't mention diversity even once. Can I please have some money?
Such a thing.
Please, just a few pennies. Like,
But let me play this
Master
TikTok,
Musk!
and then we'll come back to see if there's any like context that we missed. Just because I think I really like what you say, and I think you say it in a really funny way. So I just really want to.
Me or
Yes,
Steph?
yes, you. It's all about you.
Listen, I always get.
I don't remember what I said in my TikTok.
Well, we're gonna critique it right now. We're gonna judge everything you do. No. Here we go. Hit play. Get the notepads out. Take the notes down.
Good for you, and if so, why do you think that is? So many nonprofits are nervous to talk about equity because it triggers our administration. We're told not to center stories around immigrants, around minorities, because we are scared to lose that crucial federal funding that makes these programs run. So what do you do when you are a nonprofit organization where your missions focus is DEI? How can we truly fulfill our mission when diversity and equity are built into our organization and into the very structure of our programs? We have to constantly tiptoe around things, changing words like equity to access and reframing all the materials that we have for the sole purpose that we can continue to help these folks another day. We are forced to censor our materials in order to coddle these boys that we have in power. It is extremely frustrating and does a disservice to our community, not only at a local level, but us as an entire nation.
Sorry.
Wow, what a great TikTok.
Cringe.
Beautiful, beautiful TikTok.
These
Thank you.
boys, these boys in power.
It's the broligarchy.
Mhm.
We're I should have used that word and you didn't let me. And now a Nobel Peace Prize winner is using my word.
It's not your word. It came up long before that.
No, it didn't.
been
It's my
used in
word.
Several TikToks, and we weren't talking about the broligarchy that day.
But it's the broligarchy. We're in the broligarchy.
No, but I
Unbelievable.
loved how you said the boys. It just triggers the boys in power.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's literally where we're at. Just sensitive, just like babies in power. Who
Why
just
is this
can't
turning into
take
hate men club right now? Hey, can we
anybody.
focus right now.
Alrighty, we'll refocus. Okay. So
Not all
I
of us are
guess-
bad. There's some beautiful
So-
boys out there.
So, Steph, you already talked about a little bit of what inspired you to make that TikTok that day. So I guess just to be clear, so it sounds like your org asked you to go through just kind of everything and just make sure that this word, equity, or did they ask you to go search for any other words, or was it just, are we just looking at equity?
So it was just the word equity that I had to go through all of our social media to make sure that, and it wasn't even taking the post down. It's just making sure we're aware of those posts. And that's for when we're audited, if they come and they're like, okay, we are doing this specific DEI audit, right? Because that's a thing. To make sure that you're not mentioning certain words, then we know okay, we did mention it here, we can take this down if we need to.
So I guess so it seems like it was so common and clear and not an issue to ever use words like equity or talk about DEI. I mean, you said it's literally in the mission, so it was kind of used all the time. So what role did DEI play more in your work, but also in what your agency does? Did you see DEI was benefiting your community? Would you say that what role did DEI play before Trump? I guess pre-Trump.
I mean, kind of what I said in the video, we don't shout oh, DEI from the rooftops, right? It's you should be able to see that the programs that we're creating and we're running and people are going through are actually benefiting the people, right? And getting them to how we define DEI is getting them that equal access, right? So I think you can see that our programs are we're targeting specific people within our community, right? People that need that assistance, youth that need that assistance. And we're creating these programs around that with DEI in mind, right? We're looking at the data, and I think that's an important thing too, is you can see it in the data of these are the people that need the help, these are the services that we need to spend this money on. And I think before we ran these programs, but it's also now we want to make sure that, I want to be careful what I say, I guess, but
Yeah, don't get fired on our account, please.
with all your followers, no.
Oh yeah, 3 people. It's just me and that's it, and Reckon.
No, I'm also trying to think about how to I guess answer the question, but before we had a program specifically where we targeted helping immigrants, right? Immigrant entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs. Now, that was before. Now we're not necessarily creating programs like that because we're nervous about using the money.
The I word.
Like, which is a disservice, right? Because that is the need in our community. Is help. We have a lot of immigrants in our community, so that's like helping those immigrants. Yeah, I don't. What was the? Does that answer the question? What was the question?
No, it definitely did. Yeah, no, I was just trying to get an understanding, kind of like what things were like, I guess, before, like pre-Trump, I guess, in your role and with what your organization did.
Yeah, related to communications, like before, we didn't have to think twice if we're talking about equity or like rewording things that we're putting on our social media so that we don't mention that specific word right now. That wasn't an issue. Like I didn't even think twice about talking about equity. We wanted to talk about equity, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, now we have to think about that. We have to think about any like flyers that we're creating. We're trying to get donations for devices for one of our programs, and that was a huge conversation about how we should we mention equity on this flyer, even though it's like built into the program name. So yeah, it's a huge change when we talk about our external communications and how we talk about equity related to DEI in our programs.
And just to kind of hammer the point home, even before, and like I'm assuming like when you implement these programs, you guys collect data back, like, oh, we actually helped this person, right? Like, of course. And I feel like that should just be enough, right? Like, oh, there's this need. We've done these programs before. We need money to do these again, and this is how they helped before, and this is how they're going to continue to help. That's all it should be about, realistically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for you to go through all this like hula hoops and all these changes, it's just insane. Like it's just insane. Like it doesn't need to be done at all. Like it was working just fine. Keep it working just fine, and it was helping people, which is what the government's supposed to do.
And I feel like we keep seeing that like they're meddling in things that are working fine, and they're saying like, oh, it's waste or whatever, and then you know they're taking funds away, they're putting them back, they're moving them all over the place. So it's just like, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I guess to refocus, so like I guess Steph, like where do you guys go from here? I mean, you mentioned the training that you were in the other day. Kind of like some things that you and your org are looking, I guess, to the future at with what you're going to be doing. But like, how can you and like, I guess, how is your org, which I know is all you can speak to, but like, if you had to guess, like, how other orgs like yours, like, what are they doing to be able to still like fulfill their missions even with Trump being there, his presidency, because we can't do anything about it. So
yeah. I mean, our mission will never change. We're still trying to create a like thriving workforce, help the employers in our region, help people be economically sustain economic success or whatnot. But I think so. Like I said earlier, our organization, the federal funds, like we have programs, but we also like. I think would be okay if we just have state funding, but I think it's a lot of the partner organizations that we work with and we do fund through some of the grants that we have that are not going to be okay and not going to be able to make it because they rely so heavily on that federal funding. So I think it's more so I look to them and they're doing such like direct service with people in the community. Us as a workforce board, yes, we have some like in-house programs, but a lot of our funding gets sourced out to our nonprofits that are like actually doing the work. So they're the ones that are going to be hit pretty hard if they don't get that funding and aren't able to put those programs on. But I think right now we're just like everybody in that training I was in recently, they were just kind of confirming like DEI is not like checking off a box for compliance. We're still embedding DEI in our programs. That's not going to change. What might change is how we can talk about it externally, right? So like we're not going to be able to use some of the language that we want to use. When we go after funding, we might have to change our proposals and what that looks like, and our contract language is going to have to change. But like, we're still going to provide the services that fulfill what we're saying in our mission.
You just gotta hide it.
Go like
Well,
stealth, like be
Stealth
stealthy
mode.
about it.
You got the night goggles on now.
I mean, you're still going to see it in like, okay, these are the different people that are going through our programs. You can still see that on our social media. And that's how it should be too, I think. There was a big discussion at our organization of like, do we want to like create social media posts for like Black History Month, Women's Month, like all these like very specific, like there's like always like a month for something, right? Celebrating something. And it was decided in our organization that we're not going to just like throw up a post to be like, oh, like Black History Month, like Happy Black History Month, whatnot. We're going to just like show the programs that we have that are benefiting, where people like Black, BIPOC people are benefiting from these programs, so that we're not just like putting a post up, but we're showing it in the programs that we have. So it's our actions versus just our words. And I think that's something that's not going to change. So when you say like hide it, I think like, yeah, we're going to like hide it based on like not saying like, oh, this is an equity this, equity that, DEI, whatever, but we're still going to show it.
Right.
And they can't stop us from showing it. And we're always going to try to serve different people, like that diversity aspect of it, including different people. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad to hear that everybody, it sounds like at your org, is kind of ready to take up, like, you know, not really ready to give up, like how trying to brainstorm ways to kind of get around it and, you know, manage, I guess, the communication side of it while still doing what you guys need to do as an org. I guess my concern based off of like what you said, as we keep seeing, it sounds like at the bottom line, you said that it's the agencies that do direct service that are going to be impacted the most, and therefore it's the people receiving the service, those services that they should be able to receive, who will be ultimately impacted the most.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of wanted to end off, and we'll do final thoughts after this, but my last question, I guess, like, what worries do you see for the future? What worries do you have for the future in terms of Trump DEI policies and their impact?
I think there's a lot of worries.
Everything.
Endless worries.
Endless worry, right?
I am worried.
It's just a bottomless pit of worry.
That's me. That sums me up. I think, like those programs that are doing direct service, like, are we gonna be able to continue funding them? That's a huge worry. I think. Yeah, I think that's mostly like being able to actually help the people that need the help with the funds that we might not have. Like, how are those people going to get access to the same programs or the same resources if we're not putting the money into these nonprofits that are there to directly help them, if that makes sense.
No, perfect sense.
Yeah,
I
it
just
definitely
think,
makes
like,
sense.
the funding is a big concern, obviously, because without the funding, we can't have the people that are doing the work, right?
Yeah.
I think a concern is people losing their jobs too, the people that are doing the work.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're seeing like the unemployment numbers are going to be crazy. So yeah, I think there's so much that plays into it that but I think like the ultimate thing is like how the people are going to be affected. And then on the other end of it too, because we're a workforce board, it's going to affect the employers too that have the people in these positions. We're trying to get people the training they need to enter into employment, right? Employment that sustainable employment so that they can be like economically successful, they can live their life, right? So I think, yeah, we're gonna see it when it comes to like employers, but also the people that won't get the training.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. It sounds like maybe the loss of these types of programs. I mean, not of course the complete loss, but I mean, I guess kind of like the uncertainty around it. It does sound like it could have some pretty significant impacts. And I mean, in my job too, this kind of came up. This was asked at like our last all staff meeting, like if we were going to be impacted at all, and basically our deputy CEO said like, kind of like what you said, like inclusion on our end, like we mostly are like, I guess like it all fits, but like inclusion is mostly what we're about because a major part of what we do is like helping people with like developmental disabilities like live in the community. So she's like, you know, inclusion is all we do. You can't take that away from us. So basically, I mean, that's kind of where she left it off. So I think on one hand, there are a lot of concerns, but there's also, it sounds like a lot of great people willing to put in the work that needs to be done to make sure that these initiatives, in essence, if not in name, continue. So, yeah. Were there any final thoughts, I guess, that either of you wanted to put forward before we wrapped up our DEI talk?
Go for it.
I think so.
No, I think again for me, I was joking about it, but I really didn't understand it. You know what I mean? I truly didn't understand it. Even though I've directly benefited from it, and in my mind,
that's kind of the point. Everyone has, right?
Yeah,
in some way.
in either directly or indirectly in a certain way, for sure. And like this entire time, it's the same thought that's going, you know, through my mind, is that it's about bringing the people at the bottom that actually need it. It's not, I don't even want to say the bottom, you know what I mean? Like I don't even want to use that word, but it's the people that actually need the help, that could use a helping hand to just maybe
less privileged.
Yeah, like, you know, like I imagine it like a ladder in my mind, right? Like maybe somebody, I have male privilege, you guys have, being born in this country, white privilege, right? Like we all have certain privileges here and there. If there's a program like yours, you know, that can, the idea in my mind is like, if there's a program like yours that's helping people stuck in the lower rung of the ladder and just giving them a helping hand to just move up the ladder, it just moves everybody up the ladder, right? Like that's just the whole point. It creates, if you move somebody up, that space is left empty for somebody even less privileged than them to like move up the ladder. And you know, that's how I imagine it. Like that's how I picture it. Like these programs, like it's just creating opportunities for people to grow. Like that's what this country is supposed to be about, right?
I also want to add, like, DEI, like, hopefully we're all going to get old, right? So
yeah, let's really hope we're gonna get old, please.
to get to an older age, right? So these programs also include and the elderly population, right? So at some point when we're old, we're gonna look to these programs and hope that they can, keep us a part of society.
Right.
What I'm thinking of, like, program we have is a lot of like, we have like tech programs for like the elderly, right? Because we know that so much is changing, like in the technology world, and if we
Right.
want to make sure that they can stay in the workforce, they have to learn these skills, right? So we have these
Right.
programs that we created specifically targeting the elderly population. So that's another
Right.
example of DEI. And there could be, at any point, one of us could get sick, right?
Yeah.
And that's another thing. We have programs that help people that creates accessibility, right? So that's another
Yeah.
part of DEI. So like, I think like thinking of it like maybe not necessarily as like, okay, an immigrant coming into this country needs programs to help get that equal opportunity, but you can also think about it like, hey, I was born in this country, I'm a white person, but at some point I'm gonna benefit from these programs too, because I could, have a heart attack and need some kind of assistance that way. I could hopefully get old and need these programs to help me stay in the workforce or help me just stay a part of society. So I think like all of this is included in the DEI, DEIB, DEIA. It's all included in there. So
Yeah, and it just kind of another personal story that just triggered. It just happened today. And it just kind of like speaks to your point about the technology aspect of it. So I made a dentist appointment for my mom. She's never been to that place. She didn't know how to get there. She didn't know like how to even put the directions in her phone, right? Because she's not tech savvy. She knows how to make a phone call. She knows how to send like messages here and there. She knows how to go on TikTok and YouTube, right? But like just the simple aspect of like, hey, I can Google this place and then just click share and put it like, get directions right from there. She didn't know that. Luckily, she has me, to be able to show her that, to be able to send her that. Well, what if somebody didn't? And that's not an immigrant issue. That's not a gender issue. That's just a people issue, right? What if you're somebody older that doesn't have anybody to rely on? Who are you gonna do it? Like, you think Daddy Musk is coming? No, he's not. He's not coming.
Right.
You know what I mean? Somebody like that. Somebody like you that creates these programs, they're coming. They're helping you.
yeah, and I think because there's so many like misconceptions about what DEI is, and I think when Microsoft is updating, I think people just like we said like just think it's about like race, but
Yeah, it's more than that.
okay, that's one part of it, but there's like so much more to it, and we're all
Yeah.
going to benefit from DEI at some point in our lives, if not multiple times already at this point.
Yeah, I think it's more than just a set of policies. It's really a pulse of progress. This is, if I can say it that way, it's from the way you speak about it, the way you talked about it tonight. It's the opportunity to give somebody, how I want to say this. It's an opportunity to dignify every person's story, right? Like it's your location of your birth, what color you were born, or where you were born, or any other biases shouldn't determine your future, right? Like it's just giving somebody that tiny little bit of push, tiny little bit of hand that they can learn a skill. They can advance in a certain area. They can pick up anything, really anything. Just a tiny skill of just using how to use the phone properly. You know what I mean? To be able to do something. For older generation, that's a massive skill. My
And
father
especially
hates an
if we're-
iPhone.
And especially if we're
Any day he would rather have can I finish, bro? It's every time. No, I was just saying, like, my dad hates a cell phone. You know what I mean? Like, I've tried to teach him, but he doesn't. He like the flip phone things. But it's just like, what if one day he wants to and I'm not around? Like, maybe he could look up a phone, a program that will help him. Yeah, that's DEI.
Yeah.
I'm done. Go ahead. Go ahead. Speak your piece.
Make it clear because it's confusing.
No, go for it.
What I was just gonna say is that, like, especially if they're gonna like if we want to be touted as a meritocracy, which is what they seem to want to be.
Right.
These help us be a actual meritocracy rather
Right.
than
Absolutely.
everybody just having to deal with like unnecessary barriers.
Yeah. Yeah. The point is to take those barriers down. Why create them? You know what I mean? But we all know the real reason. We won't get into that, but that's okay. Just like, actually, you know what? Let's get into it. It's just like those boys that are failing behind. There's going to be a million more women that are graduating. If you can't advance it, if you can't teach these boys, these white men to be, better, you got to bring everybody else down below them. That's what it is. I said it. Come at me. I don't care. Hot takes.
Wait,
That was a hot take.
What? What? Like if you can't
No, I
bring
understand.
somebody up, then you got to bring other people down. That's just how it goes. No, I'm not making the point.
I understand. I understand what you're
The first video we watched where the young white boys are struggling in school, and just like that, actually, you know what? I know we want to end it here soon. I had a conversation with a white man.
a white man. No.
He's an ally. Relax. They're not all bad. But he works at a UPS packaging center. A lot of people that work with him are hardened Republican. Super Trumper, like do no wrong, MAGA, all that. We got into a conversation, and he was just telling me a story how like a lot of them just don't understand. A lot of the guys that he works with just don't understand this whole idea of the need for women to work, or this whole thing like the trad wife thing. Like they want that, right? Like you know what I mean? They don't understand like why somebody isn't that. And the thought that came into my head, and I mentioned it to you when we watched that video. I really want to see like the breakdown of like by race, right? Like okay, like you know what? Like they're only talking about white boys in there. Well, in my culture, education is highly, highly, highly prized, right? And I do come from a culture that is more restrictive toward women. In terms of like across the board, whether we're talking about wearing clothes, sports, or whatever, right? So for a lot of women, the way I see it is the only path to getting out and gaining the freedom equal to boys is a path to achievement and education, right? So that when that video says, oh, more boys are struggling or falling behind compared to girls, or a million less are going to graduate, that makes perfect sense to me, right? If this is the only avenue you're given to succeed, that's the avenue you're going to choose, right? And even now, this is kind of a little bit a tangent. If you look at the Indian culture, as I do, but it's a point to it. I'm getting to it. Now I'm gonna lose the fucking thought.
Okay, sorry, go.
No, but if you look at the Indian culture right now, a lot of the younger generation is coming abroad. That's a whole another thing, but a lot of them are girls. Even just at UConn, a lot of the exchange students that are coming from India are girls, because that's the only way they can get out from normally an oppressive society, right? That doesn't see they don't see a problem with it realistically. It's changing, but they don't really see a problem with it. So that thing makes perfect sense to me, that women today are way more successful. And when guys see that, a guy that's working at UPS, why would a girl that has a bachelor's degree, and one of the girls that works there, she works at UPS, is going to school, and is probably going to graduate and have a better job. But the guys there that are working there, they're still working at UPS. Not to say anything wrong with working at UPS. That's not the whole point of this. But a girl that's going to have, that's graduated, has a good job, she doesn't go for a lot of guys like that. She just won't. That's just, you know what I mean? Like, that's just a thing. So a lot of men see that as a threat. Like, oh, this girl doesn't need me. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when they see, I think that's part of the story with this whole MAGA Trumper thing. When we talk about providing opportunity for women or other people, they see this as like, oh, they're helping them and not me, you know. Whereas they could easily just go and apply to a program that, like, Stephanie. See my point. Coming back to this, I did have a point. You know, like, but but you have to say the whole thing just so it makes sense, right? Like, yes. But they don't understand that they could easily just as well apply to like these programs and get the same amount of help as anybody else, right?
Right.
I think that's where this issue stems from.
Yeah, no, I definitely get what you're saying. It's like a sort of like mediocrity, I guess, that sets in. Like, I don't, there's probably not any science behind it, but that we know of. But like, as a result of like privilege, I don't know if you just don't feel like threatened enough or what. But then you do feel threatened when people who you don't feel like should be more successful than you do become more successful than you, and you assume that it's because of some unfair advantage that they got from the government, when that's not really the case. It's like, no, like, people worked harder. And I think it's interesting, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna go on my own little tangent now. It's funny that, like, in terms of like that boys' school video, I was really fascinated by it, so I showed it to Jay. So we're getting another white man perspective. And he actually came to the
Can't have enough. You can't have enough. You need more. It's about diversity and inclusion. Bring more white men up.
Like, let's talk about white men. But he came to the same exact conclusion, because I asked him like why he thought boys were falling behind. And he said that, like, just based off of his personal experience in school, he always saw like more study groups were always like women, like people asking for help, or the girls, obviously. It was always the girls. Girls were leaning on each other. And he said that like male friendship obviously is different, but like even in that, like, it wasn't as common to like ask for help or create a study group or something like that. And he said like he thinks that like historically and just like socially, women just have had to like band together to get anywhere. So he thinks that's kind of where that came from. And then boys like just aren't doing that naturally, so like they're falling behind because, I don't know, it's just gotten to some sort of point where they aren't, you know, able to keep up, I guess, because they won't do what they need to do. So I just thought it was interesting that it kind of came to the same exact conclusion as to why, like, I guess at this point, what women have done to stay afloat is starting to push us forward. And I think if we looked at like some like other groups, like it's probably like a same thing, or at least like a similar mentality, just like having to band together and work harder in order to get anywhere close. Like, is, I guess.
Can I okay, a couple points there, but I'm gonna throw this. When do you think that changes? Right? When do you think that ideology of like banding together changes? Because let's just look at the past 3 elections. Women didn't vote for Hillary. They didn't band together.
No, that's true.
Right. And then there's more to it than just that.
Yeah, it's like a small. I mean, I think that gets more complicated because when we put race back into it, because school is kind of like, I guess, like if we just look at it simply like that. I guess, like, I don't know if I really want to say that, but in terms of, like, voting, race played, like, way more of a role, I think, in, like, I mean...
You mean for Kamala?
For both. I think the majority of white women voted for Trump in both of those elections.
Oh, okay.
So it's aligning themselves... And I mean, that's a greater conversation. It doesn't really have anything to do with DEI. We can have that another time. Just aligning themselves with whiteness versus womanness, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why I said, like, that was, you know, it's just funny to me because when you talk about that women had to, you know, from a younger age had to band together. I agree, and I don't disagree with that statement at all. What's another thing? What's another thing that kind of stood out to me for Jay's point is if, again, my perspective from this is different because, again, like the Indian culture is very like education focused. They don't really care about sports that much. Changing, but they don't really care. It's about go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, go be an engineer. You know what I mean? It's just those two. It's pushed heavily, especially in the immigrant community. But when you're looking at like a Hollywood movie or a TV show or anything like that, it's like, oh, well, you know, boys, why don't you go throw the ball around with your friends outside, right? That's never said to girls. It's more about like, oh, go help your mom or go be inside the house, right? There's only so much shit you're gonna do if you're a little girl and be inside the house. Again, higher likely chance that you're gonna be more academically focused, whereas boys are more, you know, go be more physical because you know that's just what you have to do. I think that just kind of plays into like Jay's point there, right? And kind of to piggyback off of him and to kind of you know integrate him into my point. If you're more in then and you're more academically inclined, chances of you being more successful are a little bit higher, right? So and then as you grow up and your priorities for men were just like go be more physical, right? Not all, but like you know, you get what I'm trying to say, and you see somebody earning more or being in a higher position, right? You feel as though like, oh, maybe you should have that, and it kind of like on a maybe on a subconscious level, like maybe men or white men in this country saw this election like, oh, well, I can't have a woman over me. You know what I mean?
I think that played a huge role.
A huge role into it, right? But like that's kind of where it comes from. Is kind of how we. This is not a DEI topic at all, but
I
you
know.
know,
I'm so sorry,
but,
Steph. If you have to go, you absolutely.
Yeah, you could absolutely just like, hey, peace out. But yeah, but it's just like kind of where it comes from. Like it's just how we how we develop our boys, you know, and maybe we should not be doing all that, like putting all this pressure to go be the tougher guy, you know. Like education is just as important, making sure like guys are learning. So I think that video is great. Like it's a good thing that we're not gonna sit here and talk about like that, like, oh, you know, why is it but it's just the disparity of it, right? Like, well, if it was girls, if we were doing this for girls, or if we were doing this for immigrants or brown boys or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it as a good thing, right? Like that video would be a whole different other thing. Like, why are we doing it for them? You know?
Yeah, a larger group definitely would not agree with it if it, if it was more specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like when you mentioned about the comments too, is like they're arguing whether it's DEI. I'm assuming like the left-leaning people are probably talking about, well, this is DEI, right? Or maybe like that doesn't really make sense, but like.
No, I think it does.
Majority of the right people would be like, oh no, this is DI and it's bad, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, people, I mean, yeah, not to stereotype, but it's mostly people on the right that think that.
Stereotype away.
If
they're true.
White people, it's not DEI. Like,
right.
Like that doesn't exist.
It's normal. It's normality. And it's kind of what Jon Stewart said. Like, I don't know if you've seen his skit where he goes like, well, we're changing we're going back to meritocracy, but the baseline is white men. You know what I mean? Like that's it, you know? Yeah. Like that's where we're setting the bar. Like, so I don't know. But yeah, we can end it here. If we're good with that. I'm good with that.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Steph, for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
We really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you can send us out, and then I will stop.
Okay. All right. So everybody, reckon. Thank you for joining us. Everybody watching on YouTube, please subscribe to us. Follow us on all the factors. We will continue to have conversations like these where I'm learning. You know, as we promised, this is not. We're not coming here as some experts. We're just these three normal people that you probably do the same thing that you do out there. You know, we're not influencers. We're just We're just here having conversations about just what's
yeah.
going on in the world. Oh, well, yeah. I'm sorry, missed 32 likes on your video. Hey, you know what? I didn't realize we were in a huge presence. Run that TikTok back, and some others while you're on the way. No. Thank you. Listen, really on a serious thing. Thank you
I
for
should have
coming and
shown
doing
the
this.
full hair transfer.
You should have. Let's do. We still have time. We still have time.
All right,
we have
I'll
not
bring
ended yet. Bring it up, please. No, we want to have more of these conversations because I think that's really where it's important because like DEI is not some goddamn scary thing that's hiding behind the alley when America walks by, just shanking them, stealing their money. That's not what DEI is. You know what I mean? Like it's just to help everybody, and that includes white people. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure Steph can say it does. Believe it or not, shocking, right? Again, if you doubt that, there's a law, Title VII of the Civil Rights Goddamn Act, that says you cannot be discriminated. You know, it's very much illegal. So, again, we appreciate Stephanie for having and enlightening us, teaching me. I learned something about myself that I really didn't know, and I'm better for it. So please follow us on all the factors and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We had our first TikTok up there today. Don't be too critical. It's my first one. I'm slowly transitioning into an influencer. I'll be famous one day.
We'll give Nav a shout out for getting that done. I think it's great.
It only took us 3 years, but it's all right. It's all right. We're getting there. But thank you for joining us on All the Factors with Nav
and Annette
and our special guest, Stephanie. Yes. Thank you. You guys have a great night. We'll see you.
Alrighty, we're stopped on Riverside, so
it's like a couple seconds
in the next like 2 or 3 seconds.